All right, welcome to another episode of New Wine Uncorked, and we are stoked to be joining you once again. A couple weeks out of not doing New Wine Uncorked makes it feel like it's a full year or so. So we're stoked to be back, and a lot's happened in life. These days, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by. We've been blessed to be able to travel, some of us. And even move. I've been in the process of moving, and everyone, we would talk about Jim's. He's been able to visit a couple of places, but nothing's as glorious as moving. And so, anyone who's ever moved, that I just have stepped away from heaven, and I could show you my area moving. Just for New Wine Uncorked. And this is more of like, the nitty gritty stuff, because moving just feels like you're free. I love it. Everyone loves moving. So I'm stoked actually to be taking some time out. And we're talking the same stuff that we've been talking about, New Wine Uncorking the possibilities, because New Wine Skins is about building bridges in contemporary culture through Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ came so to rehumanize, to help us become everything that we are created to be. And first and foremost in that is love. Where is love? Dr. Berlin, soon to be Dr. Berlin, in finishing up his doctorate, we were just talking about how he's looking into some things such as the miracles of Jesus and the water into wine. And it's just so absolutely rich for right now in today's culture, where we need this supernatural from the natural. We're all walking around and we're looking for something. People are just craving, and whether that's hope, and from the Christian standpoint, hope is different than the hope of the world. And typically that's wishful thinking for the world, that we wish for this, or we kind of like cross our fingers and hope that this outcome will come about. But for the Christian, the follower of Jesus Christ, let's say, and we've had this conversation about what is the language, the labeling, because Christian means something different to so many different peoples. And so trying to actually step deeper into, well, what do you mean when you say Christian? So for the four of us, we would say follower of Christ, because the focus must be Jesus. And when that focus is Jesus, then we see the elevation of my life. When I step further into this relationship with Jesus, then the water, the thirstiness that I have, that water filling, actually is transformed, into supernatural. The wine then is able to pour out in ways that it's not only refreshing, but it's elevating. And yes, some would say, oh, with the wine and the alcohol, absolutely, you can focus on those little details, or we can focus on the point of the miracle. And eventually, as Dr. Berlin finishes his stuff, he's going to continue to elucidate for us, well, what is the significance of that? And today we want to talk about, well, what is the significance of our lives becoming supernatural, stepping into the divine, so that we have faith and we have life? And then what is that living out of faith and life in light of this person, Jesus Christ? And so as we've been looking what's in front of us, I'm just curious, our take on how is it that the Christian, the follower of Christ, can actually hope to inject hope in today's culture? Because everywhere we look, people are always pointing at something. Now we have the January 6 hearings continuing, which, hey, I respect the office of the presidency, regardless of what man or woman holds that office. It's the office of leadership for our country. We're having these hearings, but unfortunately, it seems like the hearings tend to be yet another platform for some politician to pontificate. And the weird thing for me is you have politicians on both sides who will hold up God and faith. And so I'm just wondering, as followers of Christ, like, what is it that when we step into today's culture and stuff, that we have to even bring to a culture? What do they need from us? Is it the same? We say, oh, they need Jesus, but what does that mean? And so in today's living out of faith, what are some of the steps that a Christian, a follower of Christ, can do to be true to what Mary's prayer was, right? To Mother of Jesus. Lord, let it be done to your servant according to thy word. Ties right into scripture as well as in the will of God. What are some steps? Jim, you're a pastor. What is it that we can do from the church standpoint that says to the world, no, 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 this is what it means when we say, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. In today's culture, that just seems so difficult. But I can't believe that it is that difficult. What are we missing?
I think you bring up a good point because the whole divisive, everything's so divisive. It's our opinions, and so basically we follow kind of the opinions that we like. But when we look at Jesus's ministry, I mean, what he always did was, a lot of stuff was just done at the table, right? Not the conference table, not the study table, not all these different tables, but it was done like at the dinner table. It was done at the breakfast table, the lunch table. And when we look at Jesus's ministry, really what the ministry is about is building bridges. I mean, it's bringing together prostitutes, tax collectors, regular people. It's not just saying, okay, I'm gonna have dinner with the prostitutes today. I'm gonna go have dinner with the tax collectors tomorrow. But it's like bringing all these people together, and then having being accused of being friends of sinners, prostitutes, and all the likes. And I think it really is building bridges. I mean, we need to look beyond our opinions. We need to look beyond what we think. Um, I was looking this morning's devotion said this. It talked about seek first, or seeking. And the question is this: what are you seeking? Are you seeking from life, or are you seeking God? Right? I mean, it's like, whoa. It's a and so yeah, I think what it is. We bring hope when we can bring people together, when we can bring build bridges in the same way that Jesus built bridges over a meal, over conversations, over looking at humanity and the goodness of people instead of the badness and all. There's a woman that just passed away this past week, Sister Velma, African American woman. She's been in our church, I mean, for a long, long, long time. Just a strong advocate. But I remember years ago, she said, Pastor, you know what? This isn't the type of worship that I'm into. you know, this isn't the type of worship that I'm used to. And so I remember at a time where she was kind of visiting other African American churches and worshiping with them, but she came back to our church, Cascade View Covenant Church, and she says, the reason why I'm here is because I want the people of your church, especially the white folk, to know that black people are okay, that African American people are good people. I want them to have a good experience with the black person. And I thought, I mean, that's really her motivation to be, part of a church that was predominantly white, was that she wanted to build bridges. And I'm just so grateful for her. And then her journey as far as racial reconciliation, she went on this journey to Mosaic that kind of speaks about those things. And she came before my church and she said, as an African American woman, I learned that I had life hard, but boy, have you heard the story of the Native Americans? So she was really about, building bridges and giving hope and speaking into the lives of other people. So, I think, and I guess for me, it's not necessarily what the advice I give, but it's really the people's lives and, the people that we see that touch our lives. And so I would say Velma was one of those people who was about building bridges, about bringing people together in the same way that Jesus brought people together at the dinner table. So, I mean, I think that's where the hope is. The hope is that, are we able to bring people back together again? And to be honest, we can. Um, and I think through I look at each one of us, we've been able to do that. We've experienced, not necessarily that we've been the one that initiated it, but we've seen where people are brought together, and not only Christians. I mean, people of other religious backgrounds. I mean, that's what New Wine, New Wineskins is about. It's about bringing people together, and so I think that's where the hope is bringing people together and having conversations around love, around hope, around Jesus,
Yeah.
around moving forward and bringing out the better of everybody.
Yeah, Jim, thanks for sharing about Sister Velma. I mean, you've shared about her a number of times in our conversations here. And did she go on Journey Mosaic maybe like 4 or 5 years ago? Yeah, because I think I was there with her. I think we
Yeah,
were
yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
went
Yeah,
together.
I
Okay.
mean, she went on the journey like two or three times.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, you definitely
Okay. All right.
were
So
part of
yeah, so
that.
I got to hang out with her just a little bit. I remember we had a couple of interesting Church of God in Christ conversations while we were on the thing. So yeah, man, definitely
She was, interesting enough, she used to be like a sheriff in LA. And
of
Um,
so
course, of
So that's why that's probably kind of the interesting conversations too, is that she was a very strong, strong black woman. So, but a good heart.
Oh man, sorry to hear that she's gone, man. It's definitely a loss for your congregation and you personally and all of us that got to just hear a little bit of her legacy and the like. So yeah, man. Thinking of injecting hope. Yeah, since we've been gone, we've had a number of shootings, of just these mass shootings, whether it be the grocery store. I don't even know if we met pre that one, but we had school shootings. We just had a number of them since. And that's what I'm thinking of hope. That's where my mind goes right now, because in those situations seem to be the most hopeless ones. With the insurrection conversation committee meetings, I think we all have most of us have a perspective on that, and we're kind of okay, whatever it is, we'll see. But the shootings is one of the most frustrating things, because we almost can clearly see things need to happen, but I don't know if anyone knows what needs to happen. And I don't know if whatever political perspective you come from, even if you try not to be in politics at all, we all have different ideas, but none of us are sure about how this will work out and play. So how are you unhope? How do you inject hope in a space where you are uncertain that the hope will
Mm,
actually help? Becomes the question, right? And I think that's where, as Christians, we can contribute to the conversation, because we lean into Jesus Christ. We know that the Lord is with us. We know the Lord is suffering with us when we suffer. We know that the Lord is the one that's engaging us when we rejoice at moments, all these things. But the same token, we still live life uncertain too. We
yeah.
still need hope in our lives, injected in our lives. So for me, just being authentic about your emotions during times when you have distress is the beginning of the conversation. I honestly, yeah, when I end up hearing a school shooting, I mean, I was on a hike when I heard the school shooting that happened, and everyone in our group was just like, oh, just sad and upset. And I remember thinking, like, wow, what could have possibly happened? And then, of course, the days later, you start hearing different stories and different things happen, and I just got more and more like, this is silly. But my first thought was, I don't know what to do.
Mm.
So have the authentic emotion. Start there, and know that God's going to meet us in the middle of these times. That's the model as Christians we can portray when we have difficult moments like this. Just begin by being authentic with our emotions and what we're seeing and what we're feeling, and then not forget that the Lord is with us in the middle of all of it. So,
Kayla, that's a weird thing, I bet, being what, you're 10 days out, 7 days, right? I mean, bringing a child into this world and hearing us talk about this stuff. I'm glad, Phil, I appreciate you reminding us and bringing it back to the remembrance of the shootings, because they happen so frequently that we forget, and that's horrible. And I don't know if when I watched the January 6th stuff, I have to be honest, and this is probably just, I don't want it to be arrogant, but too many white people worrying about too many things that just don't matter. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it does matter. It's our government and shit, but like, we need the focus of like what you're talking about, Phil, like the loss of like what good is a government for the people if the people aren't there, And so I just appreciate, Phil, you bringing it back to like, that's the thing that I feel like is wrong sometimes with the church is and dude, that I started with the January 6th thing, right? And that's, that's it's the shootings are too prevalent to where they just have become part of our lives, and that's unacceptable. And I dig that phrase you just used, the unhoped, like it just it encapsulates like this feeling of just like desperation, like this desperate unhopedness, and like, yeah, like, and so for you, Kayla, right, like, and yet you have excitement because we talk about this pregnancy all the time, and so there is something still there to be excited about, right, of bringing a child into this world. There is hope, right? We have to be that hope. And so I'm just, yeah, and this is why we need one another, because when I see something or think something, I got Phil there and brother Jim there and sister Kayla going, well, but what about this? I saw this, and what about here? And so it's interesting, that we need one another's perspectives, we need that to have the fullness of hope.
Yeah, I mean, it it is interesting when you tell people that you're having a kid. Some people's reactions are, why would you want to bring a kid into this world, as if it like hasn't been messy and broken the whole time, right? Like, so I mean, that's my perspective too. It's like, well, this world needs Jesus, like we're here for a reason, and that's not, that hasn't changed. It just has changed, I guess, what it looks like over centuries. But so have we. So, bringing a kid into the world, yeah, I think it gives the perspective of hope, like the newness of life, right? Like there, I mean, there is. I just imagine what Mary was going through, right? Like the whole unknown, and the amount of just utter like loneliness and desperation and not knowing, fearing for their lives and their safety, and how is this going to work, but still saying, okay, God, I trust you, and I am going to do your will, like I am your servant, and let thy will be done according to your word, that is growing inside of me, right? Like, so just remembering that perspective too has been a really cool thing through this pregnancy for me, is like Mary's perspective on life and birth and that whole process of trusting, um, and leaning into the hope of new life, and leaning into the hope that, yeah, Jesus is here and he does sit with us. And I think you're right on, Phil. Like, we have to still process the emotions. We have to be okay with sitting in the unknown and saying, you know what, I don't know what to do in this situation. I don't even know exactly how I feel. I know that there is hope because we do have Jesus, but how, like, how does that work in these situations with the shootings? Like, people ask, like, well, but where was God? Where was God in that? Like, how is this God of love allowing these children to die? And that's a valid question. Like, that is a question that we should sit with and be like, oh yeah, that's uncomfortable. Like, man, I don't know. Like, I can't give you an answer because I'm still processing it and I don't know what to do. And what is this solution? Is there one set solution? I think that there's probably an array of things that need to happen, with mass shootings. It's and it is scary and it is unknown. And so we have to just be, I don't know, I guess okay with not being in control and not having all the answers. And that's where the trust and the faith, in Jesus as our hope come in. And how do we then step in and be the hope of Jesus to the communities that we live in? I think that's the hardest part, is we know, we know there's hope. We know Jesus. How do we become that hope for the people around us?
Yeah, and it's the tragedy, unfortunately, is happening too frequent to where it's not bringing the communities together for an extended period of time anymore. Whereas if you look back, and this is the crappy part of our history as people, is we can look back at our history and the way we treated one another and see a continual reaction and action of us going at each other violently, and that's the bummer, is that we have this history. And so for the follower of Christ, it is continually put in front of them, whether it is back in the 16 and 1700s, with the Reformation, and then the post-Reformation, whether it's the 1800s here in the Americas with the Civil War, Revolutionary War. We have been a violent people, going all the way back to first century, where they violently removed this dude walking around on the earth saying, hey, I'm here about peace, And so for the follower of Christ, it still baffles me how we're surprised at how we can treat each other. And we're not as surprised that every day we have a remedy to this hate. It's almost like this dude, Jesus, we talk about him being love in the church. We talk about grace and mercy, but we only talk about it because we're not quite sure that this grace and this mercy and this love can actually be enough for me to step into the room with a group of people who absolutely believe 100% opposite of what I believe, that I have enough love in my heart because I love Jesus that I can actually love these people. Like, I don't think that, because I look at some of the thing that sucks is you look at these shootings, they're becoming more and more diverse. It's not just one single type of shooter anymore, right? It's now becoming diversified to where we have a multiple ethnicity of shooters now, and that's not a good thing. At one time we could just pinpoint, like, okay, well, here's the profile of these mass shooters, and now we're getting it to where it's an expanding profile, which that's not the diversity we're looking for, right? We're not looking for a diverse group of shooters. What we're looking for is this diversity in the ways in which we can love one another, because Christ was so all-encompassing with his love that through the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, they've given us every avenue in ways to love one another, that there's not one person outside of our scope. But that means that we have to do what Kayla was doing, is trust. I've never, and I never will, house a person within me, right? So I, like Nicodemus, when I hear born again or something like this, I'm like, wait, what do you mean? I got to go again and become born? And so, but Kayla has this aspect of, well, this is what it feels like for a person to be within another person. Like, she has that, in all mothers do. And so we need the mothers to remind it, well, this is what it's supposed to feel like for us to be the church. Like, we're housing, we are supposed to encompass those around us as a mother does that child within the womb. And I'm not sure, to be honest with you, that some people that I interact with on a daily basis, I even want to love. And that's my fault. That's me. That's fully on me. That's why I need dudes like you, Jim, and you, Phil, and you, Kayla, teaching me how to expand my love. The question is do I want to learn how to love greater? We talk about hope, but in order to be the hope, right, I need to know what that hope that Jesus gave to my life, that made me say yes. And it seems like such a distant past when I first realized the love that Christ had for me and the forgiveness that and I don't know what it is in this life that is so strong to drain that from me, to where when I wake up in the morning and I see people, I'm like, it's cool. I'm just going to do my stuff, and then when I need something from God, I'll step in and say, oh, that's right, I need to be the hope for someone. Hey, honey, do we got those bags? I'm going to go out and give, some of the homeless people some bags, those that the houseless around this area, so I can do my good deeds, because I'm going to be praying for some good stuff from the Lord this week, right? Like, what is it that we as a people have forgotten, that this hope isn't infectious every day? Like, why is it that we let the world drown out?
Yeah, but we don't have, as Christians, when we forget that Christ is the center of our lives, Kayla, you brought it up a little while ago, or Matt, but giving up control. As a believer, Christ is the center of your life, and control you have given over to him. And when we forget that, yeah, yeah, we end up worrying about all these things and leaning into the other things to try to grasp that control. But when Christ is at the center of it, we're riding the wave with him, and that's the most scary. Yeah, that's all of the things are bound to that, all the emotion and everything. So that's to answer the question, that's a challenging thing. Um, Kayla, you brought up when you shared the question, where was God in the middle of the shootings and all the stuff? After I lost my daughter, this book here, oh, can you guys see it? The background.
Yeah, right there. Track.
Tracks of a Fellow Struggler by John Claypool was one of the most helpful resources that I got to read. This is a very, very old book. And the book is a series of sermons that he did around the time he lost his daughter. So one was a couple of years, one was maybe 4 years, one was maybe 15 or so years afterwards. And one of the things he said, he answered that question directly in the book too, because you wrestle with the same thing, losing a child. And his answer was simple. And it's the I think the truest answer when we think of all this is God was right where he was when we had our tragedy, when he had his tragedy and his son was dying on the cross. He was right there in heaven. And this was a part of the plan. This was a part of what God intended. And this was something that God suffered along with all those were suffering at the time. And as he was suffering himself, and as Jesus was suffering, I think of, Psalms 22, just the opening phrase of that psalm, my God, why have you forsaken me? And the gospel writers using that. But we sometimes forget that when you have a quote like that in a passage, it's not just talking about that quote directly, but it's alluding to the entire context of the passage. And Psalms 22, just like all other lament psalms, begin with distress, but end in hope and praise. So there's always that movement from hope and praise, from distress to hope and praise, that's bound to the life of a believer that we just can't forget as Christians.
Struggle. Yeah. Kayla, yeah.
No, I mean, it's totally because I'm like any day now, but everything goes back, like even everything that you said, starting with the waves, right? Like that's part of the natural birth process is just reframing the way you think about labor and birth, and using even the language that you use. Like it's not so much a painful experience as it is an intense experience, and contractions are surges, they're waves. And we are doing this natural birth course that's actually Christian, and she describes she was riding the waves with Jesus. But that requires letting go, right? Like when you're in the ocean, it is better. It's better to let go and ride the waves than to thrash against it. Because when you start to thrash, then you're going to start to drown and you're going to freak out, and it's going to make it worse. So when we start to fight and let our fears and our doubts and our anxieties take a hold of us, and then we're pushing Jesus out of it, and we're forgetting that then we ask, my God, why have you forsaken me? Rather than riding the waves and recognizing, hey, I'm riding the waves with Jesus. He's here with me in this moment. And it's going to be intense and it's going to be laborious, and there are going to be painful moments, but there is that hope and that praise, and it ends with that turning back to Jesus and praising him and recognizing, hey, you were walking with me. It's that cheesy poem, like the Footsteps poem, where it turns from two sets of footprints into one, and you're like, where were you? And he was like, I was carrying you, but it's that where it's like you look back and you're like, yeah, okay, I see where you were at in that, and I see you were in control the whole time. I just lost it, and I just was blinders on, not recognizing your presence.
Yeah. I don't know, Jim, if you were bashing and thrashing the whole surfing metaphor, riding with Jesus, but like that's what happens. I remember when I first came to California, and everyone's like, you're in your I think I was in my early, just entering teenage, but surfing was the thing where like, because I had done sports, and and wrestling is a sport where you think that it's all grit and you got to fight and stuff, but it's a flow, it's a dance, and I remember getting the first time a couple times for the waves, and I had skateboard and stuff, and everyone's like, oh, it's the same, and I was like, well, sort of, not really, you're on water, but same. What I found, it was much more like wrestling. When I was on the mat and just I let go and just stopped thinking and allowed what I had been training for and all that stuff to kind of flow. And we would, and even when I would go into, when I started coaching stuff, we would do these have the kids, and I did this too when I was wrestling, is close your eyes and you just let go and feel, allow your trust. And what my coach used to say is trust the process. And then when I got into ministry and started to do the work with the church, I had a mentor, and he would say, look, I know you in wrestling and stuff in sports, so you trust the process. For ministry, trust the person. And it's the person of Jesus Christ, and so when I was out there in the ocean, I would always remember, trust the like, okay, balance, all that stuff. Don't fight the wave, because you know what? The wave will always win, and so surfing made me realize, like, okay, the world wants to like partner with us. Like when you get a wave, whether it's 3 foot or 7 foot, like there's a feeling of like, wow, I'm not even doing anything. You're like, whoa. And I feel like when you step into that, like that realm with Jesus, where all of a sudden you're looking around, you're like, whoa, this is scary, because like things are happening. I feel, and we freak out like Peter on the water, and we go, oh my gosh, whoa. So I feel like there is a sense of trusting the person of Jesus Christ. And that's scary, because then we as Americans for sure feel like we got to grit, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, man, you got to be doing it. And yet if you do that on the water with surfing, or even on the mat with wrestling, like, you're going to hit the wall and you're going to bring yourself down. So it's like with faith, that's why the communal aspect has to happen, right? I need someone who is way more embedded into Jesus to teach me, hey, if you just do this, this, and this, let the Spirit guide you. But that's just so hard in our do world, because if I'm not doing anything, sitting with the Spirit that's laziness.
I'm old and forgetful, so I can't remember if I shared the story. So you talk about like riding the waves, right? Riding the waves in. When I was in Maui years ago, I was stuck in the current taking me out, right? And so, I mean, I was caught in a rip current, and I was getting farther and farther away, and and to a certain extent, pride prevented me from yelling for help. I mean, there wasn't very many people on the beach, but there was a lifeguard, and so pride just prevented me from just kind of like not saying anything. But I realized that I was getting farther and farther out, and so when you're caught in a rip current, you're supposed to swim parallel to the, and like you said, when we get in situations, we want to fight our way back. And so when you're caught in a rip current, you want to fight your way back. And so people's tendency is to swim against the current, which just tires you out, and people die that way. And so, but I kept trying to swim parallel, and I just could not get out of that rip current. And I remember I got to a point where I finally I was really tired. I felt like a mile out there, right? I mean, everybody was tiny and all, but I remember I finally just I laid on my back, I just floated, I rested, and I just said, Lord, just give me the strength. And at that moment, it was kind of like I was just going to go for everything I was worth, no matter what happened, And so, but I remember I was just floating there, just getting my energy back. And then all of a sudden, I hear someone go, hey, you okay? And there's a surfer on a board, right? And so then, my first instinct was to say, oh yeah, I'm fine, right? Because we're fine. But hope showed up. Hope showed up. And I was willing to say, kind of overlook the hope because of our pride, because I was looking for something else. But eventually, I said, yeah, I do need help. And the guy just said, he says, you're really lucky that I was out here, because just a couple weeks ago, or last week, some guy just drowned, over in this part. And so, and I think you're right. I think, when we look at life, the shootings and everything, we feel like we're in a rip current, and we want to, we want to fight, we want to swim, we want to go against the current. But I think sometimes you just have to just let the currents take you out. I mean, you need to, and hopefully there's a point to where the currents aren't as strong, but sometimes you just, you need to let the currents take you out. And the other thing too is a friend has been sharing with me that when you're caught in a rip current, you don't come back to the same place where you left, right? And so things are, become different. And so, I guess, one of the things in our conversation I'm thinking and I'm wondering about is, are the shootings preventing us from seeing the hope that is around us, right? I mean, do we, because when Phil brought that up, because when we were on our trip, I had some great conversations with my buddies that I was with, and really the whole problem is when people say gun control, what does that mean? We don't know what that means, right? I mean, people have an idea. I mean, one side would say, take away everybody's gun, right? The other person would say, you're going to have to pull the gun out of my cold, dead hands. Well, you know what? We really don't understand what gun control means. And the problem is again, it's that communication. And we, until the two political parties come together and start to understand and to talk about shootings, I don't see much hope. I mean, I don't want to say that, but I mean, until our government sits down together and says, let's figure this out, they're going to just be, and so I think that's, that becomes an issue. So I extrapolate that to say, what was Jesus about? I mean, there was a corrupt empire that was in place, that was taxing people, that was oppressing people, that was, based on racism, economy, and all this stuff. But Jesus didn't go after the government, right? I mean, is our vision too big? But I mean, Jesus, it was hanging around people. I mean, it was not. And so, I mean, was Jesus discouraged when he saw what the government was doing? Was he discouraged by seeing what the empire was doing? Broke his heart, I'm sure. But that didn't prevent him from giving hope to other people and presenting hope. And so, maybe it's, and I think in our country, we want the quick fix. We want the pill that's going to fix it now. We want the shootings to stop now. And going to Europe and Matt, you and Kyla saw these castles. These castles weren't built overnight. I mean, I heard stories about this was kind of like a family thing, in that, the person that started the stone chiseler that started building these blocks, he taught his son so that he knew that his son would carry on, that to get that, because that guy knew he wasn't going to see the castle. And maybe that's what we need to start doing, is just, bring hope to where hope is right now. We might not be able to see all the shooting stopped, but, bringing hope to, to Kayla to say, hey, you know what, this world is a good world, and helping give hope to Kayla to say, no, it'll be okay. It's a rough world. Yeah. But you know what, there's hope. And so bringing hope to the people that are around us, and not being distracted by the world that, that is just, not listening to God. So,
yeah. And I
wonder if sometimes we want it, when it comes to hope, we want it too fast.
Yeah.
We want too much, we want to try to absorb too much. But you know what, even within our own community, I mean, that's where Jesus started. He started like Capernaum, Jerusalem. I mean, these little towns, he didn't go after the Roman Empire. It's like, I'm going to change the Roman Empire. In fact, he let the Roman Empire, and so, and the greater vision is that, that over time, the word's going to get out. And so, and maybe that's the way Jesus does it. We just, we begin giving hope to those that are around us, and that people, when it's like Abraham, I will bless you in order that you would be a blessing. And that when we give people hope, that hopefully they'll give others hope, and that continues that. And so,
yeah, to be a blessing for the other in the midst of your own trials and suffering. That's the key. And I feel like, because I need someone like Phil to give me hope after he's gone through something that I'm like, I can't ever do that, And so with Phil sitting there before me, and when he embraces me with hope, knowing that what, you've gone through, Phil, for someone to be able to say the Lord's will, though, like according to the Lord's plan, even in the midst of the a child departing from us, being taken from us, you know, to have a perspective to say, but Lord, I know you are good. I know, because you could quit, right? Phil, you had every reason to quit, yet that would quit on your daughter, your wife, you know, like your family. And yet and that would quit on me. You know, you would have quit on me, and you didn't. You stepped in because of something greater, right? And that hope. And it's not that I haven't experienced tragedy or suffering, right? And so my suffering can be redemptive to you, right? And to you, Jim, and to you, Kayla. But that only happens when we embrace one another at a level that's deeper than political ideology, skin tone, gender, you know, sexual preference, all that stuff. When we see each other as someone who is worthy, who is needy, who I must love, because in doing so, I'm actually loving God at such a level that I'm loving myself. That need starts to tap into exactly what you're talking about, Jim, is that, well, none of this is going to find a remedy if I just quit. And the world's telling me to basically quit on this and say, who cares about the mass shootings? As long as I protect myself, if one of those yahoos comes into, and we actually classify the shooters as bad people and this and that, and they're clearly off, but they're not bad or badder, you know, worse off than me in the sense of sin. You know, if I read the Gospels the way it is sin. Okay. What they've done is horrific, but I can't say it's blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. So there is still forgiveness for these folks, these dudes. And if I can't embrace you, who are a Republican or a Democrat or a libertarian, who believe that, you know, immigration is this, or believe that homosexuality is this, if I can't embrace you, how am I supposed to embrace someone who the world is going to tell me is a monster? Someone who, you know, because the reality is the last thing on my mind is to go to a person who has just shot up a school of children. I'm sorry, you know, or even in a supermarket or a church or wherever. The last thing I want to do is to go and tell this person that even what you've just done doesn't erase the fact that Jesus is right here alongside you saying, dude, I love you. I love you. That to me, that, to be honest with you, that pisses me off about Jesus. It irritates me that he's so loving, you know, but it doesn't irritate me in an hour when I need his love, right? It only irritates me when these people who I agree with society that are, you know, less than, you know, and then the Spirit says, but dude, guess what? If you allow a group to decide that these people are less than, there's a group that's going to do that for you. And that's just not the Jesus way. And so I think that's where the boldness of the Christian church, of the Jesus-centered church, has faded, because I wonder if we look at the world like you're saying, Jim, we look too macro. We're like, oh my gosh, there's no hope. But that's not true. If we just paused and said, actually, if I look right where I'm at, because this is the only place I can impact, I would see hope just blossoming, you know, but it's usually not at the speed, it's not at the level. And to be honest, I don't see hope when it doesn't specifically and intentionally and right here and now impact me, you know, because then I'm like, there's no hope. I got to wait through this stuff. This isn't hopeful until I spend time with people who love Jesus more than me. And that's why, like, even though this is Zoom, every time I meet with you, Jim, and you, Phil, and you, Kayla, I like go, I need more Jesus. Like, I want these people's Jesus. Like, I want what they have. And so it pushes me to want to love Jesus more, because I know what it says. I do trust that's why I love, instead of the will of God, because we know what his will is. He desires all to be saved, right? But according to thy word says, oh, well, I know that some are going to be saved through the redemptive suffering that I'm going to go through, that the Lord has called me into. And I think that's where followers of Christ are like, you know what? I'm cool with grace when it, you know, flows in my direction and I'm swimming with the current, right? Don't talk to me about grace and forgiveness when you expect for me to sit in that current, like Jim's talking about, for hours upon hours And you want me to work for the good of this person who is what society claims is trash? No. And Jesus is like, that's what I did for you. And I never once said that you were trash. I said you were the beloved. So you do that for me. And I'm like, oh, it's the beautiful mystery, right? At very one moment, it makes you want to throw up. And yet at the very same moment, I want to stand and just go outside and yell and say, Jesus, yay. How do we then continue to get that, like that encouragement daily for folks that are feeling hopeless and they still love Jesus, because they might not be tuning in on Fridays. They might not be going to your church, Jim, or to your gathering, right, Phil? They're not reading your stuff. How is it though that on a daily basis, we can know that we are that hope and it actually is making a difference?
I don't think that there's like one straight answer except just doing our best to show up every single day as Jesus, as loving as we can be, as stepping into the discomfort and the unknown and saying, I don't know how today will go. I don't know what today holds, but I do know that my Jesus is here, my Jesus is present. And so I'm going to lean into that. And if I can do my best to lean into that, then maybe in the interactions that I have, those people will see or feel something different about me. And that will hopefully impact their life. And maybe so one of those people will ask, hey, what's up with you? Why are you the way you are? And then you get to say, let me tell you about my Jesus, which is exactly the way. But no, I think it's just stepping into each day, taking it a day at a time, saying, I'm not perfect. I know that I'm going to mess up today, that I'm going to sin, and that I am forever thankful for the grace and mercy and forgiveness that our Savior brings, and acknowledging that, just as much as I need that, the world needs that. And so when I can just say, all right, Jesus, today's Friday, we're gonna live for you. We're gonna live today. We're gonna, and just have, expectation that he is going to show up, that he is there. And that's the expectancy, right? It's like, I know you are my hope. I'm trusting that you are my hope. And I am expectant that you will be present with me today. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to go to the supermarket. And you know what? Maybe some other person in the aisle next to me will see that. So I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else that we can do other than just show up and know that Jesus is going to show up too.
Yeah, exactly like Kayla said. I think opportunities. I mean, I think God provides us with opportunities. And I think opportunities, I mean, I think at times where, I'll sit and visit with somebody and it's like, wow, thanks. Thank you for sharing that. And that it was an opportunity that God provided for me to be encouraged, to be blessed. But I think opportunities, when we go into the stores, I mean, we don't know what people are going through. And so, to be able to make a nice comment, to encourage somebody, to bless them with a kind word, I mean, even a simple word, I mean, changes everything. I mean, it does for us. And so I think, God provides opportunities for us to interact when we interact because we're relational. And so I think part of it is just recognizing the opportunities. Is this an opportunity, or taking advantage of the opportunity? And sometimes, you think, oops, that was, that's a mistake, or asking for discernment, because, there are people that just suck the joy out of your life and you just kind of like, okay, I think I'm going to go over here because the prices of gas are so high and the prices of joy is so high today. I just do not have, but you know what? God is such a good God that he provides opportunities for us to experience hope and joy. I think God is a God that wants other people to have the opportunity. And so are we willing to take advantage of those opportunities instead of again, looking at the ideologies of the world and being discouraged by that. And so hope, and I think hope comes in all kinds of sizes. I mean, in all kinds of doses, but I think it's good for the soul, and people could use it, and so I would say hopeful isn't necessarily just saying, hey, Jesus is our hope and all that, but it's a kind word. It's a good word. I think hope is stories. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is being around people that share stories. And like, we get back to Genesis and Phil, I mean, just out of the pain, out of like being caught in a rip current, Phil emerges, and there's times where you're still in that current, but to be able to hear a story, and not necessarily to say, I don't know, I mean, just share your story, the pain you've gone
Yeah.
through, kind of like getting back to what Phil talked about, talking about your emotions, but that that God sustained, God, help me through this in this way. And I think there's a way of necessarily just sharing your story and God's goodness than trying to preach at somebody and trying to convince them. And so I think our stories, and I think opportunities of hope and sharing hope and receiving hope is all around, because God is just a very, very good God, and he loves us. I mean, that's the bottom line. We talk about loving us, and so why wouldn't God want us to be hopeful? Why wouldn't God want us to experience joy? And so
Yeah. And that's true. And the stories, you hit it right on the head, Jim. Like the stories, it's this intertwining story of divine and human, natural and supernatural. And it's this intertwining of love, grace, mercy, and God is inviting us in. And this is what New Wine, New Wineskins is all about. To step into the truth of the divine so as to understand the truth of the human. And that's what he's calling us to do. And in that, then we are swept up into this rip current, this tide, this wave of love. And we can do nothing but then surf on that and just incorporate and just include people, because then they're like, holy crap, you're right. This thing called love is way beyond what anything I ever thought. And that's what New Wine's all about. And so we're stoked that you joined us today right here on YouTube. Just go right below, right there in the bottom right-hand corner there. You see that New Wine logo, the New Wineskins logo? Put your mouse over it and it says subscribe. Then you subscribe. And that way, every Friday when we go live, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Pacific Daily Time, you'll be notified that we're live. Then go on over to Facebook /New Wine, New Wineskins, and hit like right underneath there. Is in that way too. Anytime we post articles from our journal, Cultural Encounters, or other videos come up, you will be notified, because we are inviting you into the New Wine family, because to be poured out for the sake of Jesus Christ, to be transformed from water into wine, that divine offering, so as to become everything that Christ hopes for in our lives. And so on behalf of Phil and Jim and Kayla, I'm Matt. This has been another episode of New Wine Uncorked. We're stoked that you joined us this week. We look forward to joining us next week when we do this again. So until then, we'll see you on the flip side. Have a good one.